Hello and welcome to episode 3 of our continuing study of the Stephen Mitchell translation of the Harper Collins edition of the Dao De Jing, this wonderful 25-century-old book of Chinese wisdom, allegedly written by this murky figure called Lao Tzu, and for centuries and across all cultures, thinking men and women like you and I have been enjoying, opening up to, and wrestling with these philosophical aphorisms that seem so simple on the surface, and yet they point to something quite provocative. And you and I have been working through the first 30 chapters of it or so. And again, chapters simply means 30 verses, 30 poems. And seeing what we see and feeling what we feel and testing this process of letting mystical literature cast its spell. You know, is there something in these provocative passages that evokes a kind of image, a kind of indefinable clarity, if I can put it that way, that it is ineffable, that is impossible to put into words? Can words point to something beyond words? I suppose that's what all poetry and music is trying to do. So let's see if these passages continue to do that for us. So starting here with chapter 32. The Tao can't be perceived. Smaller than an electron, it contains uncountable galaxies. If powerful men and women could remain centered in the Tao, all things would be in harmony. The world would become a paradise. All people would be at peace, and the law would be written in their hearts. When you have names and forms, know that they are provisional. When you have institutions, know where their functions should end. Knowing when to stop, you can avoid any danger. All things end in the Tao as rivers flow into the sea. Yeah, you know, there's an acknowledgement here, isn't there, that we have to use words just to talk. We have to use concepts just to think. We need some institutions in order to create the systems by which you and I collaboratively create and manifest justice in the world, or nurturing, or growth, or beauty. But we have to always remember, as it said at the beginning of the Dao De Jing, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. So our justice system doesn't give us perfect justice. And we want to serve justice, not the system, right? That's the big mistake, is we create these systems and these conceptual frameworks, and then we serve them instead of using conceptual frameworks and institutional structures to serve us. There's a lot packed into that little chapter 32, isn't there? Chapter 33. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. If you stay in the center and embrace death with your whole heart, you will endure forever. What a beautiful passage about wealth and joy. You know, the Old English word that is the source of our word wealth really means health, wellness. And I think many of us have discovered this, that wealth isn't a number. There's no dollar amount that gets you into wealth. Wealth is when all of your basic needs and some pleasures have been met, certainly. But beyond that, it's just more and more and more. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly wealthy, truly rich. That's really beautiful. So, chapter 34. The great Tao flows everywhere. All things are born from it, yet it doesn't create them. It pours itself into its work, yet it makes no claim. It nourishes infinite worlds, yet it doesn't hold on to them. Since it is merged with all things and hidden in their hearts, it can be called humble. Since all things vanish into it and it alone endures, it can be called great. It isn't aware of its greatness, thus it is truly great. What a spell Lao Tzu casts with these, these sort of ever expanding. It's sort of like a lotus flower opening up petal after petal after petal. The idea just grows richer and sweeter and more fragrant as the chapter unfolds. Skipping over to chapter 36. If you want to shrink something, you must first allow it to expand. If you want to get rid of something, you must first allow it to flourish. If you want to take something, you must first allow it to be given. This is called the subtle perception of the way things are. The soft overcomes the hard, the slow overcomes the fast. Let your workings remain a mystery. Just show people the results. Beautiful. The way things are. Marcus Aurelius talks a lot about that. I'm thinking about parallels now between the Roman philosophy of Stoicism and the Taoism of the Dao De Jing, that the Tao is, of course, the way, and accepting the way things are right now and then getting to work, right, to affect changes that I want. Marcus Aurelius in Stoicism talks about that all the time, that whatever your work is, you have to start with the acceptance of these current conditions. Without resentment, without a lot of drama, just say, yes, this is what it is. And now we go to the next thing and get creative about how that process unfolds. Chapter 37. The Tao never does anything, yet through it all things are done. If powerful men and women could center themselves in it, the whole world would be transformed by itself in its natural rhythms. People would be content with their simple, everyday lives in harmony and free of desire. When there is no desire, all things are at peace. And the word desire there, think pathological craving. Obviously, some desires are good. The desire to heal, the desire to learn, the desire to be wise, the desire to love. So don't get caught up in these words here. Think more along the Buddhist concept of trishna, destructive craving. When there is no destructive craving, then all things are at peace. What Lao Tzu calls the Tao, Marcus Aurelius called the Logos, or nature, the way of nature. Chapter 38. The master doesn't try to be powerful, thus he is truly powerful. The ordinary man keeps reaching for power, thus he never has enough. The master does nothing, yet he leaves nothing undone. The ordinary man is always doing things, yet many more are left to be done. Now in this next passage, listen to this sort of sneer in Lao Tzu's voice. The kind man does something, yet something remains undone. The just man does something and leaves many things to be done. The moral man does something, and when no one responds, he rolls up his sleeves and uses force. So the kind man, the just man, the moral man. Lao Tzu, again, as in those earlier chapters, is gently mocking that, I think, generally Confucian idea that goodness and morality must be structurally imposed from outside. And I don't think that's really a Confucian idea, by the way, but this isn't the place to get into that. But that's Lao Tzu or the Daoists' pushback against the idea that we must consciously create and force, if necessary, goodness. And boy, is that an anathema to the whole Taoist project of letting our own innate empathy, kindness, and so on pour forth the way the Tao pours forth all of this. To amplify that point, Lao Tzu goes on, when the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality, sort of a de-evolution. When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is the husk of true faith and the beginning of chaos. Therefore, the master concerns himself with the depths and not the surface, with the fruit and not the flower. He has no will of his own. He dwells in reality and lets all illusions go. Chapter 41. This is a funny one. When a superior man hears of the Tao, he immediately begins to embody it. When an average man hears of the Tao, he half believes it, half doubts it. When a foolish man hears of the Tao, he laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao. It's an interesting thing that Lao Tzu is trying on here. Here's this Tao, this ineffable, mysterious, sacred source that can't be defined or described. And so when it is taught or when it is shown, the wisest people go, I should maybe learn to embody that. And when so-so or kind of average people hear about it, and they half believe it and they half doubt it. But when the worst kind of person discovers it, when a foolish man hears about it, they just mock it and they just throw it away. It reminds me of that line in the Gospels where Jesus tells his disciples, don't cast your pearls before swine. It wasn't a very nice thing to say that, people are going to, there are going to be people who are going to try to destroy your teachings, or who not only don't hear them, they're actually going to actively try to destroy them. The way pigs would not appreciate pearls, they would crush them in their teeth. To go on with chapter 41. Thus it is said, the path into the light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct path seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest art seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. What a list, what a litany of things appear one way but are really another. And he closes out chapter 41 by saying, the Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things. Jump over to chapter 43. Love this one, it's very short. The gentlest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. This shows the value of Wu Wei, of non-action. Teaching without words, performing without actions, that is the master's way. And you can't help but think of water. The gentlest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. Think of how water can carve the Grand Canyon, can carve continents, can split rocks. And there's a message there about yin. In the yin and yang polarity, yin is the empty, soft, wet, feminine side, and yang is the hard, dry, bright, hot, warm, masculine side. Again, not in gender, not in human gender terms, but in sort of metaphysical qualities terms. That the whole Dao De Jing seems to be about that, seems to be about remembering the yin, remembering the strength of softness, the strength of emptiness, the strength of leaving space. We humans seem to emphasize yang too much and have forgotten yin. It's almost as if Lao Tzu wrote this book, the Dao De Jing, to remind us of the power of yin lying all around us at the ends of our fingertips. Chapter 45. True perfection seems imperfect. Oh, reminds me of what we just said a couple chapters ago. True perfection seems imperfect, yet it is perfectly itself. True fullness seems empty, yet it is fully present. True straightness seems crooked. True wisdom seems foolish. True art seems artless. The master allows things to happen. She shapes events as they come. She steps out of the way and lets the Tao speak for itself. Chapter 46. When a country, back to sort of sociology or political philosophy here for a moment, what about the community, right? We've talked a lot about my own individual relationship with the Tao, but what about us? So 46 says, when a country is in harmony with the Tao, the factories make trucks and tractors. When a country goes counter to the Tao, warheads are stockpiled outside the city. You can see Stephen Mitchell taking a few liberties here, kind of using modern technology, but the point is the same. To go on, there is no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend oneself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. Jesus says throughout the Gospels, fear not. And Buddha counsels us to let go of our worrisome concepts of the future, of others, to come out of fear and craving and into the serenity of nirvanic consciousness. It seems to be about that same thing. Chapter 47. Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out your window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The master arrives without leaving, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing. I know that paradoxical language drives a lot of people away from the Dao De Jing. They're like, I don't get this book. People say it's important. I don't know. It's not for me. Be patient with this piece. Be patient with these apparent contradictions or paradoxes. The more you know, the less you understand. You know what that means. That sometimes the more data you accumulate, the more information you have, your head becomes chock full of stuff, and you feel your sort of native instinctual understanding getting cloudier and cloudier and cloudier. It's a fascinating and somewhat provocative way to put it, to be sure. There's no doubt about that. Here's another piece on that same sort of epistemological line. Chapter 48, Lao Tzu writes, in the pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of Tao, every day something is dropped. There's that idea of emptiness, emptying out again. He goes on, less and less do you need to force things until finally you arrive at Wu Wei, at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing is left undone. Oh, is that the fourth or fifth or sixth time we've heard a phrase like that? When nothing is forced, then there's a sense of all potentials are still available to us. True mastery, he says, can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. In a video I made a while back on Wu Wei, I talked about surfing as an example of Wu Wei. Surfers don't interfere with the water. They don't tell the ocean what to do. They work with what is. They align their energies and their intentions and their creativity and their power with the energies, intentions, creativities, and powers of the sea. And thus they can get on that wave and surf. What if we looked at our lives a little bit more like surfers and saw the people and the evolutions and the energies and the forces and the materials and opportunities and setbacks around us as waves that we could learn to navigate through. Going over to chapter 50 here. The master gives himself up to whatever the moment brings. He knows that he is going to die, and he has nothing left to hold on to, no illusions in his mind, no resistances in his body. He doesn't think about his actions. They flow from the core of his being. He holds nothing back from life. Therefore, he is ready for death, as a man is ready for sleep after a good day's work. That sounds exactly like something Marcus Aurelius could have written. He talks exactly like that in his beautiful classic called The Meditations. Maybe I'll do that in a video soon. Beautiful, beautiful stuff about acceptance, that Buddhist idea of non-attachment. And then and only then do you finally, again, show up fully awake, fully aware. By letting go of everything, you finally receive everything. Finally, real love becomes possible. Chapter 51. Every being in the universe is an expression of the Tao. It springs into existence, unconscious, perfect, free, takes on a physical body, lets circumstances complete it. This is why every being spontaneously honors the Tao. The Tao gives birth to all beings, nourishes them, maintains them, cares for them, comforts them, protects them, takes them back to itself, creating without possessing, acting without expecting, guiding without interfering. That is why love of the Tao is in the very nature of things. I feel like that's a good time for us to pause again as we continue our deep reading and consideration of these many millennia old wisdom sayings from the other side of the world where I live, from the Dao De Jing. So join us next time in episode 4 of our continuing study of the Dao De Jing. See you on the other side.